Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to our speaker series for this evening. Our speaker is Mr. Lewis Miller, General Manager of Atlanta Jackson International Airport. And actually, it's the Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson International Airport. Hartsfield Jackson International. If I read my notes, I'd be right the first time out of the box. When it comes to aviation leadership, Mr. Lewis is considered an expert at the global level. Not only does he manage the busiest airport in the world, but he also serves as treasurer for Airports Council International Worldwide. Mr. Miller took the helm at Hartsfield Jackson in September 2010 with a version of providing worldwide air transportation service in a collaborative effort with all of the airport partners, including the airlines, concessionaires, federal agencies, and all airport tenants. Among the major priorities is the completion of the airport's new international terminal, the Maynard H. Jackson Jr. International Terminal, which is pretty much opening very shortly, right? Spring of 2012. As a well-balanced professional, Mr. Lewis also is committed to continuing his tradition of community involvement. A former executive director for both the Salt Lake City Airport Authority and Tampa International Airport, Mr. Lewis has received numerous awards for his community service. In fact, he flew back to Tampa in November to receive an award for his work there. The Salvation Army Tampa Area Command honored Mr. Lewis and his wife Cindy with the 2010 Helen A. Davis Spirit for Humanity Award, referring to the Millers as, quote, two of our community's most generous servants, unquote. A native of Salt Lake City, Mr. Miller was inducted into the Utah Travel Council's Tourism Hall of Fame, among other several honors he received there and later in Tampa. Without further ado, I'd like to pass on the podium to Mr. Lewis Miller.
Thank you very much, John. I asked him to keep the introduction short, and he didn't listen, so that's kind of normal. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It is an honor to be here tonight, and I'm just glad to see so many of you here, and I'll try to get through this very quickly, because I understand there's a basketball game going on or something. Yeah, you might want to, but we'll get that done. We'll go as quickly as we can, but thank you for inviting me being here tonight. And I thought maybe I was in Los Angeles with the Lakers, but I guess that's just the Lakers here. So being new to the community, I'm not that familiar with all the various schools, but a good chance for me to come out and talk with you. I really do appreciate that. I'm going to keep this very open and general. I guess maybe the best way to do is I'll go through the presentation. When I get to the end, if you have questions or something, we could ask them all at the end, or if you want to stop in the middle. It might be better if we get to the end, because I have a whole lot of information I'm going to cover, but then at the end we could have 15, 20 minutes, whatever you want, of questions and answers, and I'd be happy to answer that. The first thing I want to do is make sure that everybody understands who we are and what we do. A lot of people think that we are an independent agency. We're not. We're actually owned by the City of Atlanta. I work for Mayor Reed. Mayor Reed is my boss. I work directly for the Chief Operating Officer of the city. We're a standalone enterprise fund within the City of Atlanta, and we receive no city or state taxpayer funding. A lot of other people also think that their tax dollars are going to fund the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. That's not the case. We are self-sustaining. We make it off our own revenues, and I'll talk more about our revenues in the future as to what we make. It's somewhere around $420 million a year, so it's a very large operation that we keep going forward. We have to go through the Atlanta City Council for legislative approvals. In fact, I spent in two council, Transportation Committee and Finance Committee today. I was down there for 4 hours getting things approved before they could go to the full City Council next week and get approved. So legislative processes through the City Council of Atlanta, and then the executive process is also through Mayor Reed. And Mayor Reed is a terrific individual. He has really put his heart and soul into doing what's best for our community. And he's reached out. You've probably read about where Mayor Reed has gotten with Governor Deal and is pushing for even deepening the Port of Savannah. Things like that on a statewide basis. So he's very committed to doing what's right. And he allows us to operate the airport and run the airport in a business-like fashion. So that's a good thing as well. A few things that I want to talk about is some of the funding. I mentioned funding to you a few minutes ago. And one of our major funding sources for capital projects is what's known as a passenger facility charge. So every time you fly, right now, there's a $4.50 fee that's added to your ticket. And the airlines collect that fee from you directly and it gets reverted back to the airport. It has to be used for capital projects, and they have to be approved by the FAA, and as it says up there, they have to be safety, security, capacity, or increased competition going forward. But that, if you think about it, not per in-plane passenger, we have 45 million in-plane passengers a year. So you can just do the math, I won't do it for you. 45 times $4.50. That's quite a bit of money coming back to about $175 million a year we get in for capital projects alone. And one of the largest projects was undertaken was the fifth runway that we built at Hartsfield-Jackson was funded mostly with PFC. So you can see it's a very important thing for us. Our concern with it is that they don't increase the PFC. The PFC went into place back in 1990, as it shows up there, it was at $3. Then in 2000, and this is controlled by the U.S. government, our great Congress up there that's so effective, but we won't say anymore. But they got it going, and they increased it to $4.50 in 2000. But just inflation alone says today, and the cost of construction, that should be somewhere around $7.50 to make it the same and equal, and it hasn't been raised. So we've been pushing to try to get that increased. And they just did another reauthorization of the FAA bill, and that was passed for 4 more years, so it looks like we're going to be waiting a little bit longer. Another fee that comes into you, we get money from the Airport Improvement Program for capital projects. This is a small amount of money. We get about $15 to $18 million a year out of that program. But the thing about that is it's 7.5% ticket tax. So every time you fly again, if you look on your ticket, and there's a fee that 7.5% of the cost of your ticket goes back to the Federal Aviation Administration, which is the federal government. Now, 95% of what they fund out of that is air traffic control system. If you think about air traffic and the major investment that the federal government has to make in just controlling the air traffic, for example, you'll see here a little later, we have almost 1 million landings and takeoffs a year at Hartsfield-Jackson. And they got to be controlled and they got to be brought in, so the air traffic control is the ones that really run that. So that's where most of the money goes, and then we get a small piece of that, which is called the AIP, or the Airport Improvement Program, that we can help fund projects as well that are federally approved and meet the criteria and the standards for what they're doing in the federal government. So, but our largest revenue sources, by far, are not airline fees. This is going to surprise you. I mean, we get fees from the airlines. We get landing fees. Of course, they pay a fee. Every time the plane lands, they have to pay us a fee. At the end of the month, when the number of landings add up, then they rent space from us and what we're doing. But if you take what that's called aeronautical revenues, and the airline's aeronautical passenger revenues at the airport only make up about 42% of our total revenues. So 58% of our revenues are coming from what are called non-aeronautical sources. And the largest sources there, obviously, parking, concession revenues, food and beverage, ground transportation, gift shops, all of that stuff, taxi cabs, when they come to the airport, pay a fee for getting in and out. So if you think about that, so 58% of our revenues from non-aeronautical sources. If you look at the cost that the airlines pay on what we call a per passenger basis, if you add their total fees up, they're paying to operate at Hartsfield-Jackson about $5.10 per passenger. If you look at the average in the United States, that average cost is between $7.75 and $8 per passenger. So you can see we're doing very well here, and it makes it, and we keep the costs as low as we possibly can because we want to do what we can to stimulate more air service. The more air service we have in and out of Hartsfield-Jackson, the better it is for the community, more jobs, more growth opportunities, and those things are coming along. So we work very hard to keep the aeronautical revenues down and then maximize the non-aeronautical revenues. Some of the focus that we have things going on, just to give you a glance of the airport, I mentioned 920,000 total flights last year. That's how many landed and took off from Hartsfield-Jackson. The year before, there was actually 950. And we saw last year have a shrinkage in 2011 in the number of landings and takeoffs, yet there was not a shrinkage in the number of passengers. And the reason this happened is because the airlines, because of the high cost of fuel, they found out that the smaller airplanes, the 50 passenger and 70 passenger regional jets, were not cost effective. So we had fewer landings and takeoffs, but most of those were a reduction in the small planes, and we had larger planes coming in with more passengers on them. So we actually had an increase in the number of passengers last year, increased by 4.5%, which was way above the national average, which was about 2.2%. So we're continuing to outgrow the national average on what's changing, so that's a good thing. If you think of numbers of passengers on an average day, and you know how averages work, 250,000 passengers go through Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Averages are just averages. So on a peak busy day, we've had as many as 375,000 to 400,000 people going in and out of the airport. Now, a lot of those are just making connections. You know, Delta runs a major hub here, and you know, just be glad we have Delta, because Delta Airlines has made Atlanta what it is today as far as air service and air opportunities. And they have 70% of their passengers never leave the airport. They fly in here from Orlando to come to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta on to Los Angeles or something. So they make a connection, get off one plane into the other. But that's good for us at the airport, because we like to encourage those people when they get off one airplane to go another airplane. They've got an hour and a half to kill, so go out and spend some money. Because if they spend money at the airport, we get concession fees coming back. So we get a percentage of the fees that are paid to the concessionaires. And as you've all heard, a lot of the airlines don't give away much on the airplanes anymore as far as serving meals like they used to and things like that. So we have to make sure we have adequate amount of facilities within the airport to serve the needs of our customers when they're going through. We also have nonstop flights to 156 cities in the United States. And here again, 156 cities within the U.S. you can fly to nonstop out of Hartsfield-Jackson. Busiest domestic airport in the United States. Busiest in the number of cities that are served as well. But then even more importantly, there are 80 international cities in 50 countries that are served nonstop out of Hartsfield-Jackson. So that's what makes our community really thrive when it comes to growing that, because you get all of those passengers coming through here, all of those cities. So anyone who wants to fly anywhere, if you're in what's known as a spoke city, and we're a hub airport, if you're in a spoke city, you got to connect through Atlanta to go wherever you want. And the good thing about Atlanta is 80% of the U.S. population is within a 2-hour flight of the airport. So within a 2-hour flight coming down here to Hartsfield-Jackson, come in, make a connection, and go. So that really gives an opportunity for the airlines to continue to grow. As far as Southwest growth in the future, and I'll talk more about Southwest towards the end because they're coming in here now. We have a total of 5.6 million square foot terminal complex. The new international terminal, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, is going to add another 1.2 million square feet. So you can see how large we're getting. Our problem is we're very landlocked. We only have 4,700 acres within the airport. That's our campus. To put it into perspective, in Dallas-Fort Worth, they have 16,000 acres. Orlando has 15,000 acres. The new Denver airport has 25,000 acres. So you can see Hartsfield-Jackson is kind of landlocked, but we've done a very good job, a very efficient operation with the airport that we have. And we have 5 runways, and they're working very well. And we're going to look to how we're going to expand to meet the needs of our community in the future. So, passenger traffic, I mentioned the increases that we're seeing up here. You can see back in 2008, that was our record year ever. 90 million people passed through Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. It dropped in 2009, obviously, because of the crisis with the economy, what was going on, to 88.0. And then in 2010, it increased back to 89.3. So we only had 1 year of decreases. Then in 2011, we were at 92.4 million. So you can see the growth has continued, 3.5% over 10. But you can see, and then international traffic, that's the other side of it. That increased by nearly 8% last year. So we're seeing great growth in international traffic as well as, far better internationally than we are in domestic. But on the national average, we're much better. I mentioned earlier, the average was 2%. We're 1.5% higher than that, so that's a good thing. But I talked about our operations being down. I mentioned that already. They're down because of the smaller planes aren't flying, and we got more large planes. So you can see some of the traffic that's happened. Future projects that we have at the airport, the international terminal, we keep saying it's going to open in the spring. And we still say the spring, because if I miss that by 1 hour or 1 day, of course the media will have a heyday telling us what we're doing. But in reality, we hope to open the facility in sometime in the middle of May, and I'll show you a lot more about that later. We're completing a runway extension. We're taking our longest runway and extending it by 500 feet. A lot of people would wonder, why would you do that? Well, that on hot days in the summer, payload on the aircraft, both for cargo and the number of passengers, on hot days, you can't go as far when you got, because of the compression in the air. So the longer the runway, the further they can go. So we're working with Delta and other partners. We're extending the longest runway by 500 feet. That allows them to fly anywhere, almost anywhere in the world, even on hot days without taking a penalty on weight. So that's a good thing. We're going to do A380 enhancements. We talked about this at dinner tonight. The A380 is the largest airplane that flies in the world. Korean Air has told us there's a chance they will bring that into Hartsfield-Jackson sometime in 2013, maybe 2014. And the reason we have to make enhancements at a cost of about $30 million is because the wide wingspan on the A380, the engines come out, so we have to put shoulders on the sides of the runways and the taxiways when it moves around. And then it's large volume at the airport. We have to spend another $15 million at the actual gate complex to get all these people off the airplane when they're coming in. So that's another large project. Concourse D and Concourse C midpoint expansions, they're huge too. If you've been at the airport, you've seen how Concourse A and B are much wider than C and D. C and D were built, they were more narrow for smaller planes back when they were built a long time ago. So what we're doing in the midpoint area is putting the midpoint expansion, allowing more elevators and escalators to get down to the transportation mall, which will make that move much quicker, putting more concession space in there as well. So that's another big project. The terminal roadway system, that's out to bid right now. That's a major project that's going to realign the roads. Right now when you're coming in, you'd have to do too many merge and there's too many weaves going in and out. This will fix all of that, so it's a major project. Pedestrian and parking walkways, and then a runway replacement. It's not actually a new runway, but our runways are getting old, so we're going to have to replace the concrete in the major portion of one of our runways. Now, it's difficult for us to do that because when we take a runway out of service, that takes away some of our capacity. So a lot of that work is done at night. A lot of that work is open and closed. Do it in the periods of times throughout the year when we can get it done the quickest. And that'll be a staged project that'll move along very well. But all of these projects continue to add more jobs in our community. That's the one thing I want to point out. We continue with our construction program and what we're doing, so that's important as well. Some of the economic facts of the airport. We've talked to many people, and the airport is what they told us that have relocated companies here into the United States, into Atlanta especially. The number one reason they chose Atlanta metropolitan area was because of the airport. In fact, two of them told us that. Well, you know, Porsche, you've heard, is coming here. Their North American headquarters are going to be just right next to the new terminal, in fact, when that opens up. Reliance Worldwide came here from Australia, in the Health Link Logistics, and those two alone had 200 jobs, and they said the only reason they came here was because of the airport. So it's a huge impact on what happens on our community and our economic for the future as we continue to grow. We did a study back in 2009 on what is the economic impact. We're going to update this again in 2014. Want to do it every 5 years because it means a lot. And we know it's changed and it's getting better. But back then it was $32.6 billion in direct economic impact because of the airport. Within the confines of the airport, within the fences, within that 4,700 acres, 58,000 jobs on site. You just think about it for a minute. Our largest tenant obviously is Delta Airlines. Delta alone has just short of 30,000 employees, something like 29,000 right around there, so you can see how that grows. And then on top of that, it enables an additional 403,000 jobs regionally. All the suppliers, the freight forwarders, and everybody else that's off of the airport, you wouldn't have if it wasn't for the airport. So the hotels, the convention centers, all of those things are there because the airport is easy for people to get here. And the study also said that we're responsible for $16 billion in personal income. So here again, even in these tough times, the airport continues to grow and help our economy, and we're going to see that happen even more when we open the new international terminal. And I'm going to talk about that now, and this is quite a project. It's large. It was part of our 2000 master plan. Way back in 2000, we started planning for the future and said, what are we going to need? And we back then even talked about needing this new international terminal to service the growth in international passengers. The FAA projects that we'll have, by 2015, we'll be at 13 million international passengers. Now they projected that back in actually five years ago. Well, this year alone, we hit 9.5 million. So you can see we're moving towards that very quickly. And we need more capacity to serve all of those people. So the construction started back in 2008. It's been going on very well. The planning, design, and construction alone created an additional 3,000 jobs. And as we speak today, we know we're wrapping the project up. There's about 900 employees still working on the international terminal every day, finishing the construction and bringing it to fruition. So that's a good thing as well. 1,500 direct and indirect jobs needed to operate the new facility. But just like for concession space alone, they'll have to hire 500 more concessions employees to operate the new facilities within the international terminal than we have today. And so the airlines are going to grow. They'll have ticketing facilities out there. They'll have baggage claim facilities, all of that stuff that they have in the domestic terminal that are also going to have in international. So that will continue to grow and add more jobs. There's a couple pictures here I just want to show you to see that you can do what you say you were going to do. This is a rendering. The north elevation of the new terminal was a rendering of what we said we were going to build before we ever started. That's what was put together. And there's what it looks like today. So you can see we're following along with the pattern. Exactly what we wanted to build is just what we're doing. Some other facts and figures. It's going to open in the spring of 2012. Realistically, probably about mid-May. Cost of $1.4 billion. Think about that. $1.4 billion for 1.2 million square feet of space. Now, a lot of people say that's a lot of cost per square foot, and it is very high, but you got to think about it. It's not just the building. You got to build their aprons where the aircraft taxi in and out, where they park the airplanes, the fuel system to get fuel to the aircraft. That's all underground, hydrant fuel systems. You've got to expand your fuel system to do it. Got to build the roadway system coming in, which you'll see some pictures of in a minute, where you have to have the infrastructure to serve the terminal, because this terminal is going to be on the other side of the airport from where the current domestic terminal is. And I'll show you in a minute what you have to do to get there. You'll actually enter this, come to the terminal up Interstate 75, not off of 85 the way you do it today. So we'll show you how that works as well. So but it's going well. It's going to have a 12-gate concourse. We have 40 gates in Concourse E. So what we're going to have when this is finished is Concourse E is the international concourse. Concourse F has the 12. 28 and 12 is 40. We'll have 40 total gates plus the international terminal. Be one of the largest international complexes in the United States. So what it do is providing for is an opportunity for the airlines to continue to grow, bring more service into Hartsfield-Jackson, grow the economy more, provide more service into some of the countries where we don't have service today, or increase the number of daily departures. So that's a good thing for us as well. This just shows the international complex. A lot of people are wondering, on the left side of this slide is Concourse E, so if you've flown today, that's where the 28 gates are. On the right side, as you can see, is the new international terminal plus Concourse F, and that's one big complex. It's going to be connected underground with the people mover system, the same way we do it today. The train system will take you all the way from domestic terminal all the way out to the international terminal. We'll have parking out there, and I'll show you some more pictures of that in a minute. The terminal roadways, you can see there on the right side, everything had to be done to meet the needs of this independent, separate passenger terminal from our domestic terminal. One of the biggest things it does, and the best things that the people, and the reason I bolded that there, it eliminates the baggage recheck process for people coming back. Right now, when you fly into Atlanta, whether you're coming here from, let's just say, Germany or wherever, you go through Customs and Border Protection, you go through all of that process to be checked out to make sure you're legal to come into the country. After you finish that, you have to recheck your bag, you have to go through security again, and you have to take the people mover system, you have to come all the way back to the domestic terminal and claim your bag and leave. That process by itself can take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. So in the future, when you get off the plane, you'll get out and you'll walk away, and I'll show you how that works too. So it's a big difference. It's going to be dedicated for international travelers only. I talked about that earlier. The plane train, baggage handling system, security checkpoints are all going to be increased to make it work efficiently. The gate capacity, and the good thing about the increased gate capacity is not only does it help us on international flights, it helps us on domestic flights. And you ask, why is that? Well, here's what it is. Right now, a lot of times if you're flying out of Hartsfield-Jackson and you're going to London, you'll depart out of Concourse A or Concourse B or something like that because there was no gate available out on Concourse E. We're out of gates. So now that we have added 12 more gates, you'll be able to use all of those. That frees up a gate for some domestic capacity as well. So the airlines are very happy with that because it allows them to not only expand their international route structure, but their domestic route structure as well. So that's a very positive benefit. There's another picture just to give you an idea. That's what we call the international atrium. That's within the terminal building itself. That's what it looks like today. So you can see it's coming along. It's great progress. The floors are in. You can see that it is just about reached the point where it's ready to start turning over for finish out the punch list and reach substantial completion. So that's coming along nicely. Some of the good things about the airport that is different at this terminal is the separate levels for arrivals and departures on the roadway system. Right now, when you drive into Hartsfield-Jackson, you pull into the terminal, whether you're the north terminal or south terminal, and the arrivals and departures, you're all on the same roadway system. So you got heavy peak arrival time, you got to go by where those arrivals are and get to the departure area. It's the same roadway system. The new international terminal has two roadway systems: an international roadway system, or excuse me, a arrivals roadway system and a departure roadway system. So the ticket counters and are on different levels. Ticket counter is on the lower level, or excuse me, the upper level, and the bag claim is on the lower level. So you will drive in and pick your customer up if they're flying in. At the lower level, if you're dropping somebody off, you'll be the upper level road. So that's a good as well. 8 security checkpoint lanes we're going to be adding out there. We have 32 security checkpoint lanes now. We add 8 more that'll handle the international departure people when they're leaving. 5 security recheck lanes for the connecting passengers will be added as well. New Customs and Border Protection facility will be used. 2 parking garages with more than 3,500 parking spaces. Right now at the airport we have almost 30,000 parking spaces. This adds a more than 10% increase in our parking, and yet our international traffic is less than 10% of our total passengers. So you can see we're going to be able to handle the parking out there with a short-term walkable lot right across the street, an hourly and a park and ride lot as well. So we'll add those, and they'll be open when we start it, and we're going to add more than 20 shopping and dining locations within the airport if we can get our concessions program worked out, which we're going to make that to happen. So some of the things you need to know about the new international terminal is different now. It's going to be accessible from Interstate 75. Okay, I mentioned that earlier. You come to the domestic terminal on 85, Interstate 75 at exit 239. All passengers traveling outside of the United States will have to check in the international terminal. So you will go out there, if you take a cab to the airport, you'll be fine. They'll drop you off out there. If you drive, you need to park out there at one of the parking facilities and be in there. And so passengers will not be able to check in for international flights at domestic terminal. So you want to make sure you go to the right terminal, and you'll see what we're going to do to try to educate the public to make sure they know that when we get started. Other things you need to know: Atlanta-bound passengers arriving on Concourse E or New Concourse F will pick their luggage up at the international bag claim area and just walk out the front door of the new terminal. Now, if you made a mistake and you parked in the domestic area, parking spaces today, and came out there on the shuttle, we are going to run a shuttle service back and forth. We will have a shuttle that will go from the international terminal to the domestic terminal both ways. So if you come to the wrong one or go to the wrong one, the shuttle will take you out there or bring you back. And that's only a 12-minute ride, 12 to 14 minutes. So it's still better to go through that whole baggage recheck than what you're doing. So if you made the mistake and you were flying Delta and you parked in the domestic terminal, came into the airport and flew and went all the way to E and took off and went to London, when you came back, you couldn't ride the train back to the domestic terminal, but we'll have a shuttle that'll bring you up there at no cost. And that'll run 24 hours a day, so it'll work very well, and it works good. And like at MARTA passengers, a lot of people come to the airport on MARTA. Well, the MARTA station will not be at the international terminal. The MARTA station will stay right where it is, but if they took MARTA, when they come back here again, the shuttle will bring them back to the MARTA station and drop them off. The car rental facilities will also have a separate shuttle that will take them from the international terminal to the new rent-a-car facility as well. So customers will be treated better, and they won't have to go through that baggage recheck. That's the most important thing. And I suspect anybody that flies the first time, if they make a mistake and park in the wrong area, the next time they won't do that. So it'll take a while to learn that, and you'll see. Here's a picture of Concourse F. This is a rendering of what we said Concourse F was going to look like when it was finished. There's a picture of what it looks like today. You can see the signs are already in, the directional signs, and the things are going. The restrooms are in. You can see everything is getting finished. The floor here is just about totally done. We're putting in some of the furniture actually in the hold rooms as well. So that's moving along nicely, and we're very pleased with the progress on Concourse F. Some of the challenges that we're going to face obviously is informing the traveling public about the 2-terminal complex, and I'm going to show you in a minute what we're doing with the Georgia Department of Transportation to educate people. To have different passenger types, like right now we're going to change all of our domestic signs too within the within the current people mover system, telling people bag claim. Right now it's easy, we just tell everybody to go to baggage claim. But now we're going to have 2 baggage claims. So if you're down in the train system, We're going to have signs to tell you which bag claim, international bag claim versus domestic bag claim. So those signs are all going to be made. The wayfinding signs, Custom and Border Protection staffing, we're a little concerned about that. With the federal government right now going through the painstaking process of trying to get their budgets approved, trying to get increased staffing is a bit difficult, and we've been working very hard. Mayor Reed has contacted President Obama and the folks at Customs and Border Protection just to make sure that they have the proper staffing levels here that we're going to need. But we think it's going to be okay, but we just want to make sure they have enough employees to clear people through customs as quickly as they can. Concessions, you heard about, we've read about that. The City Council approved these on January 3rd. We've had some protests. We actually have some lawsuits going on. We're going to get through this process. We're actually, when it's finished, we're going to have some of the leading retail brands in the airport, world-class food and beverage services, business services, sleep rest accommodations. We're going to put all of that in there as well. Really, the only major challenge we have on the concessions is the food and beverage. So, and it's not only the food and beverage in the international terminal. We're replacing food and beverage in every location within the airport. So 125 locations of food and beverage will be replaced. And that's why we have put together the RFP process to try to open up to as many people as possible. And here again, not everybody can win. And so those that didn't win, we've got some protests going on, but I think we're going to get through those before in time to open the building, that's for sure. The parking I mentioned there, 1,100 spaces will be right across the street, just like we have short-term spaces in our current terminal building. They'll be over there. We're going to have designated spaces for alternative fuel vehicles, and that's a good thing, so people start driving alternative fuel vehicles have a priority parking. We're going to have 2,400 spaces in our park ride garage. It's going to be opening when we open this, which is only a 4-minute shuttle ride to the terminal, so that'll be very convenient for people. We're going to have a gold reserve lot as well. So the parking and the parking pricing out at the international terminal, the rates will be the same as the rates at the domestic terminal. So there will be no difference. We won't charge people a premium to park out here in this area. And you can see that one picture is the garage right across the street from the terminal. You can see the walkway that brings you over across the roadway system into the terminal building itself. So this is a picture of the arrivals hall, which we said, a rendering of what we thought it was going to look like. This is what it looks like today, and it's come along very well. We're very pleased with the progress that's being made by the contract. And these pictures are actually about 6 weeks old, so there's a lot has happened since they were taken as well. The shuttle connector I mentioned before, it's going to run back and forth between the terminal buildings. It's free. It's going to operate 24 hours per day. The big question we got from a lot of the MARTA customers, and I've mentioned this before, are they going to be able to still come to the international terminal? The answer is yes. They'll get off of MARTA. The shuttle will take them out to the international terminal and we'll bring them back when they get back. So they won't have a problem going back. And here again, that cost of that shuttle is no cost to the passenger. It's free for them as well. Also serves a new rental car facility as well. So that's going to work those people, inbound customers coming in to rent a car. This is part of our problem here, and this is just a kind of an idea of what some of the signs are going to look like. Coming to I-75, you've got to come to International Terminal. So, and we mentioned before, like this is a sign that could go up or will go up as you're coming from downtown Atlanta, coming out to the airport. Right now, when you're coming from downtown or midtown, as soon as you get out there, it tells you everything. Stay to your right, take 85 to go to the airport. Now we're going to tell people 85 to the airport for domestic passengers, 75 for international passengers. So we're going to make sure we get that through. We're spending almost $10 million on signage changes, working with Georgia Department of Transportation to make this happen, to get people located. There's a little map that shows you how many signs are going to be changed. That we've got to take all these out here. We're going to replace 15 structures. They'll be totally replaced. We're going to reuse 58 of the existing structures out there. A new supplemental roadway signs, some of them on the side. There'll be some signs on the side that they don't have today that'll very clearly tell you international terminal flights use Interstate 75, domestic use 85. We're going to add signs at 27 locations, 113 new panels in 100 locations. So you can see there's a lot of things that's going to happen. And if you drive around now, you'll see some signs that are already up out there. You'll see some brand new signs they're covered with a tarp. They've got a blue tarp over them. Those they can just come and tear out the night before we open. But a lot of the changes are going to have to happen very quickly when we first open the terminal. So if we open it, let's say May 16th is our date. On May 15th, the night of May 15th, we've got to have people out there contractors out there changing signs, getting the final change in. So when people get up in the morning and come to the airport on the 16th, they will have the right signage. So that's that's a challenge for us, but it will be done in time. Cargo, we always talk about the importance of air cargo coming into the airport. International exports are up about 2%. 2011 weekly cargo flights are up 40% over what they were in 2010. These are all cargo flights. $60 to $72 million regional economic impact for having cargo. So cargo's not as important as passengers, but it is very important to our community. Additional weekly Cargolux flights, they have 5 weekly 747 freighters coming in. China Cargo Airlines actually absorbed other carriers. They're adding 16 new flights per month on China Airlines coming in. So that's important to us as well, and that provides cargo opportunities to go all over the world. Some of the things we've done with cargo, we've upgraded and completed to support the larger 747-8 series aircraft that's shown over there, that Asiana cargo. That also took modifications because the 747-800 has even got a wider wingspan than the standard 747 passenger airplane. So we had to make some modifications, but those have been done. Qatar Airlines started in 2011. Asiana started in 2010 and Singapore in 2009. So that growth is coming as well. We want to continue it. Something else you've probably heard about is Southwest Airlines. And I just want to bring you up to date on a few things that means to our community. And it's huge. It's really big. They started service, here we say scheduled to begin in February. They've already started. They started service on this last Sunday of this week. They started their first flights into here. They now have 16 flights a day coming in here. AirTran still has 172 flights a day, so the two added together, we're still up close to 190 flights a day coming in. And the good thing about what Southwest is going to do for us, several good things. The first one is they're not going to have an impact on our airspace. Actually, it's going to be a very positive impact on our airspace, even though we're going to fly as many airplanes as AirTran flew, because they're not going to run the connecting hub. And the connecting hub is like both Delta and AirTran. When they fly today, they have 3 peaks throughout the day. They bring all the airplanes in 3 different times, and so they can get people to connect from one flight to another. Southwest doesn't operate that way. They serve mostly off the origination destination passengers. They will connect you if you want to connect, but they're running their system. So they start in the morning and they go equally throughout the day. And to give you an example of what that means, Southwest will average departures per day per gate. They average between 9.5 and 10. AirTran is at about 6 to 7. So you see, right there, they could do a 50% increase in the number of flights in the same number of gates. So that's going to be important to us. But we expect that to take some time before they grow. We expect annual operation to increase by about 3% of what happened in 2009. And passengers will increase by about 3.2 million per year. But that's going to take 2 or 3 years before that happens. And if you look at Atlanta, it was interesting. Atlanta was by far the largest market in the United States that Southwest did not serve. You can see up here, they started service in Minneapolis and Milwaukee. They started that in 2009. But Charlotte, Cincinnati, Memphis, some of those are the ones they don't serve. And Atlanta is by far the largest. So them coming in here means a lot to them. And it's going to mean a lot for our customers, well, and you when you travel. And so I'll talk about that in a minute. This looks like a complicated map, but it really isn't. If you just, where the little hearts are, that Southwest love symbol when they're doing, those are cities that Southwest serves by themselves. AirTran does not serve those cities. Now we show the AirTran cities are in green, and the blue is where they're overlapping service. But if don't need to count those out, but within the continental United States, there are 40 markets that Southwest serves that AirTran does not serve today. 29 of those markets are west of Atlanta, so you can see out there where you're going. What it does is it brings in opportunities for more competition, and competition is always a good thing. And don't get me wrong, we owe the world to Delta Airlines. We're just glad Delta's here and they do a fantastic job for our community. But here again, competition always helps. And I was talking with Richard Anderson, the CEO of Delta. In 80% of the cities they serve in the United States that Delta serves, they're already competing with Southwest Airlines. So they know how to compete. And they can compete, and they will compete, so they'll do a good job. So you'll see AirTran have opportunities, Southwest have opportunities to continue to grow, and it's going to be a good thing. They don't charge for your check bag, they don't charge change fees when you fly. They do keep the cost of air service down, And they definitely stimulate more traffic. So we expect a stimulation of origination, destination passengers coming in here when they get up and running in full force. And they expect to have the FAA approval on their single operating certificate by the end of March. And then they think it's going to take them about 18 months, at least 18 months, to fully integrate AirTran and make them part of Southwest. So that'll be a process. And when they're all finished, they'll have more jobs here than AirTran has today. So they're not going to come in here and cut jobs. They're going to continue to come in and grow our community as best they can. We also did another study. We call it the Atlanta Metropolitan Aviation Capacity Study, AMAX, Phase 2. And this was to try to see if we should have a second airport in the Atlanta area. And this study was funded by the FAA, and we actually have done it twice. And if you think of the major cities in the United States, all of the major cities have 2 airports. Chicago has 2, New York has 3, Denver only has 1, excuse me. They had 2, but then they built the new airport. Houston has 2, Dallas has 2, Los Angeles has several. So all the major cities have more than 1 airport, and yet we don't. So we went out and did a study, but the study came back. I won't spend too much time on the details of this. While a second airport maybe could be used or would be utilized within the Atlanta area, economically it wasn't feasible in any way, shape, or form. The cost to build that second airport would not meet the demands under a current aviation system that the airlines would pay on a cost per passenger. And I'll show you more of that in a minute. So we went through, looked at the population forecast of the 20-county area, worked with the Atlanta Regional Commission to do the population growth of what they thought was going to happen. And according to the commission, strong growth is forecast with almost 3 million more people and 1.8 million more jobs expected by 2040. So if that's what's going to happen in our community, we know we need to make sure we meet that, because that'll also increase the need for air service and traffic in the future. We started the study out, and we determined by doing passenger surveys of people, where do you start your trip before you come to the airport? 76% of the originating passengers that come to the airport, when they leave in the morning or in the afternoon, whenever they come to the airport, started 76% locations that were north of Interstate 20. So you'd say, okay, well, if you're going to build a second airport, you ought to make it north of I-20 or put it out there somewhere. So we had 29 sites that we looked at before, 4 of the previous sites, 2 were commercial service airports, Air Reserve Base, obviously Dobbins. We looked at all of these possibilities, 22 existing general aviation sites to say, is there a way that you could do that? We narrowed that down to 8 sites, possibilities around the community. 1 was the previous site, the Air Reserve Base stayed, and the 6 existing general aviation sites we looked at as well. But after completing that study and getting that done, I don't have a slide on there, we went back and said, okay, if you were to build that airport, the amount of infrastructure that would be required, both roadway systems and building the airport and getting in there, the cost per passenger for the airlines would be, at the cheapest, would be $57 per passenger. Put that in context. The cost per passenger operate at Hartsfield-Jackson today is just over $5, right at $5. So it's more than 10 times greater. The average in the U.S. is about $7.50. So economically, it wasn't feasible. So the study said, we're not going to do it now. My guess is the FAA is going to come back and do another study in 5 or 6 years to continue to look at it to see what's going to happen and what will change. So what we need to do is make sure we can continue to service the needs of the community. So we're in the process of updating the long-range master plan for Hartsfield-Jackson. It's a process that will take about 18 months. We started it 2 months ago because it hasn't been done since 1999. So we want to get the new update, and that'll give us what we call a 5-year, 10-year, and 20-year development plan, and how we're going to meet the needs of the community based on the forecast of air passengers in the future and where we're going to go. So that kind of covered a whole lot of information for you tonight, and I hope I didn't take too long. But now, if you have questions, feel free. I'm here about anything I talked about or anything else. Yes?
Do they plan on adding upstairs, downstairs on domestic, like for arrival departments?
That probably is not going to happen. The master plan will determine if we're going to make that change. But right now, we seem to work pretty well, but there's an opportunity, and the master plan will study that, if we can have 2-level roadway system coming into the airport in the future. Yes?
Today there was announced a cell phone lot.
Yes.
What was the business side to that, the thinking, and are there any safety concerns to that?
Actually, safety concerns, it increases safety, because what we do is if we open this cell phone light, it'll actually open tomorrow. It was announced today. It allows the people that are coming out to pick somebody up to not have to sit and circle around the roadway system. If they don't want to go into a parking garage, and if that person's flight is 20 minutes late for some reason, they continue to just circle around, so your emissions and more traffic on the road by going into the cell phone lot. You just go in there and sit. Now, you can't park there. You can go in that lot, stay in your car, and wait until the person you're going to pick up arrives, and then you can drive from the lot up to the curbside and pick them up and drive away. So it eliminates all the driving around the airport. No revenue at all, but it's worth it. In the long run, it cost us about $75,000 to build that. We built it with our own folks, but it does take so much traffic out the road and eliminates so much congestion that it makes it far better. And also, if a person's waiting at the curb, and then we have one of our traffic enforcement officers come up and say, "You can't wait here," they get upset and everything. If you say, "Yeah, but you can just circle around and go to the cell phone waiting lot and come back and pick them up when they get there." So it's a customer service. So not a money maker, but a good customer service. Yes?
By how much do you forecast new international business to Atlanta due to the new logistic capabilities that you have at the international terminal?
We mentioned that the FAA has set up to 13 million passengers a year from our 9.8 million by 2015. We think we'll meet that. The new master plan will go through a longer study to show how that will grow.
Not necessarily with passengers, but with cargo and the international businesses being able to transport cargo into Atlanta. Now, how much do you forecast the influx of percentage of new business and new suppliers to Atlanta?
We already have 175 freight forwarders in the Atlanta area. And one of the things they tell us is they don't have enough opportunities for cargo, and that's exactly what you mentioned. One thing I didn't mention about Southwest, by the way, to take your question, AirTran does not carry cargo on airplanes at all. All the other major carriers do, AirTran does not. Southwest does. So Southwest has already leased from us and did some remodeling and finishing of a 26,000 square foot cargo facility. So that alone is going to add jobs and add more cargo opportunities. Most of that is for domestic. Now the international cargo, the Asianas and the Qatars, they don't use the terminal, so they're over on the other side. I think as demand grows, I think you're going to see air cargo continue to grow, which will, once it comes in, it will add more jobs and add more opportunities in the community.
I think Atlanta's number 10 in cargo in the United States.
Right, and yeah, but if you look at it from size of airport and take away the FedEx hubs in Memphis and all of those things, we actually come down to where if you get rid of the hubs out of there, as far as we have more cargo than other cities our size, we come down to number 7. Because if you think about it, Memphis is the busiest cargo airport in the world. Well, it's because Federal Express flies in and out of there and makes the connections, and the Cubs are coming to go. Same with UPS and others, but you're exactly right. But Atlanta is seeing some good growth, and we expect it to continue. I've seen someone here, yes?
You had mentioned it wasn't economically feasible to build a second airport, but then you also had mentioned that Atlanta's airport is 3 to 4 times smaller than a lot of airports as far as acreage. How do you see the size of land keep up with the demand that you speak of as far as growth and population? I'm assuming there's enough land to keep up with these.
Well, that's what the master plan update is going to show us. It's going to tell us in about 18 months from now, we'll have an idea that will answer those questions. How are we going to handle the demand 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and 20 years based on their forecast of aviation demand? Now, we have 5 runways already. We know we have room to build a 6th. We know we have room to put more gates, more concourses within the airport, but this master plan will define where we do it and how we do it. Now, I mentioned how small we are. You think LaGuardia Airport has 1,800 acres. They're less than a third of our size. Kennedy is smaller than we are. So there's a lot that can be done within the land we have, but the master plan will answer all those questions you're asking for us. And like I mentioned, I suspect that they're going to relook at a study again in the future to see if a second airport would be economically feasible. So. Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. Based on the past administration, past people that were at the airport, Mr. DaCosta, when you came in, how easy was it to implement plans that you had, and these were already plans in place that you had to just follow through with, or did you have to have your own strategic vision of where you wanted to go with the airport? We have put together our own vision of what we're doing. I've kept most of the people that were here under Ben DaCosta. He had put together a quality team of individuals, and we're taking it forward. In fact, the City Council just approved today, in fact, allowing me to create make an organizational change to redivide how some of the structure reports and the hierarchy within the airport.
But obviously the international terminal was already underway, so we're finishing that. The cell phone lot that was mentioned, that came in since I was here. Updating the master plan since I was here. So we're doing strategic plans. We're trying, Ben did a great job. Ben DaCosta was here, I believe 12 years, and he had done a great job at the airport. And I've talked with Ben on several occasions. I knew Ben before very well. So I've come in and re-looking at what they were doing and continue to do that in the future. And I haven't found we have to change a whole lot because they've done a good job to here.
With an accounting background and being a CPA, how did your educational background be the vehicle to where you're at now as the manager at the airport, or the general manager at the airport?
Well, I started out as a CPA, but my first 5 years in Salt Lake City, back before you were born in 1976, I was hired as the director of finance and the chief accountant. So I ran the financial systems in Salt Lake City. I did that for 5 years. Learned about the operation of the airport and everything. Then the airport director there left and took a job in Houston, and they recruited for a new airport director, and I was selected to be the director. But if you think about it, it's the business background. This is a huge business. You know, the people that maintain the runways and do all the other stuff are operations people that work for me, but what you really have to know is running a large business. So my finance background really paid off in doing that. Coming in from being a CPA and I worked in a CPA firm for 5 years doing audits, and then I went to the airport as a finance director for 5 years, and then having 14 years in Salt Lake City as the general manager, we called the airport director there, and then another 14 years in Tampa coming here. So my 35 years I've learned a lot, but it's the business background that brings you forward. And that's the asset that I brought to the airport, was understanding the finances and the business of how you make it work.
I know it's just preliminary, the photo that you had on the international airport, the sign, I noticed it was only in English. You think there might be an idea for other languages to be on the sign?
For sure, we're going to call it Latinization, and we're going to get Hispanic signage throughout the airport as well. Yes, but we also have 8 different languages on our people mover systems that people can read. But we can't do every single language of every country that flies in here. But Hispanic is one that will be done. You know. Yes, sir.
How often do you use financial models?
How often do I do what?
Use financial models.
The financial models, we update that. Right now we're going to do another bond issue that you'll see coming out here of about $530 million that'll be coming out. We look at our financial model every year to make sure we're meeting our debt service requirements, because we have a large amount of debt service. Our agreements require that we exceed our debt service by 1.5%, our coverage on our debt service, so we do that on a regular basis. So we're continuously updating. Every year we update our business plan, and then we do the detailed financial models every 5 years, getting into the bottom line. Yes?
There's a company called CETA that I'm familiar with that supposedly governs all of the airports in the country. Do they fit in this picture with your plans, or where do they fit in?
They don't govern airports. They're involved. The FAA governs the airports in the United States, the Federal Aviation Administration. CETA does a lot of work when it comes to scheduling and running flight information systems and other things. And we actually have contracts with CETA here at Hartsfield-Jackson. So they do work for us when it comes to our flight information display systems you see when you're driving in and other stuff. So, yes?
Through that we're in Clayton County, they have a transportation problem with shuttle buses. And do you guys do any collaborations with Clayton County, Monroe, as far as, since you deal with Atlanta, we got students that go to school out here that don't have cars, and we rely on transportation because you got people that live in Jonesboro, downtown Atlanta, and they can't get to school. So have you guys ever thought about some type of way of making a shuttle bus system that can collaborate people from all over the city?
From schools around?
Right, from schools in the area or whatever.
No, we haven't gotten into that. We got to worry about up in the air, not on the ground. It's a good point, though. Anything else?
I got a question. What kind of skill sets should students be prepared for to go into business?
Well, skill sets for the airport is just about anything that's out there. If you think about it like Delta Airlines alone, they need individuals that can handle mechanical facilities. They need people that can handle customer service. They need people that can do the business models that you talked about. They need people that can do financial forecasting for them and planning for them. And that's the same is true with all of the airport. Working for me, I mentioned there's 58,000 employees at the airport. About 1,000 of those employees work under the Department of Aviation. So the most of them are at the other departments, but you know, we have law enforcement, we have police officers out there, we have firefighters out there, but we have those people in our commercial development. They're coming in and they're trying to go out and attract new ways to make revenue at the airport, so the commercial development side comes in and pushed in there. So just about every trade that is out there is utilized at the airport. So, and business is a big one, the business background, because here again, the financial plan, the airport itself is a standalone enterprise fund, but you think about, just take Delta or Southwest or any one of the airlines that are out there. They need skilled people that can help them manage their operations to the best they can going forward. So it takes a lot of talented individuals to run an airline, especially to run an airport, that's for sure.
Time for one more.
What's the process to be hired, or what process would one have to go through to be hired by the airport for a position?
All of our jobs are advertised through the City of Atlanta's Department of Human Resources. So you go onto their website and postings for jobs, and that's where they're listed.
All right, how about a round of applause for our speaker?
Well, this is a little token of our appreciation, Louis. It says, in appreciation of your commitment, your time, and willingness in sharing your knowledge and expertise with the students, faculty, and staff at Clayton State University, February 15, 2012.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is a Valentine's present a day late. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.